Welcome back to the OIS podcast. In this episode, Mikey Garufi, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Nicox, discusses challenges that have been overcome and which remain in successfully developing the company. He also explains how his years on the national Italian swimming team played a role in the story. Let's listen as Mikey tells the tale.
Hello, OIS podcast audience. This is Rob Rothman here with another episode of the OIS podcast. For those of you who don't know me, I am a glaucoma specialist practicing clinically in New York. Spend about half of my time seeing patients. The other half of my time I spend running InFocus Capital Partners, which is an ophthalmic-focused venture capital fund. We are nearing the end of our investment life cycle with 13 early stage assets in ophthalmology. We do have one or two later things, but we don't invest in the public space at all. And for those of you who have listened to some of my other podcasts, you know that I have elected to interview interesting people in ophthalmology to try and dive in a little bit towards the background of those people who've been responsible for making companies what they are today. And with that as a backdrop, it's my pleasure to introduce Mikey Garufi, who is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Nicox. Nicox has a long history of involvement in ophthalmology, and we're going to get into most of that with Mikey in a few minutes. And it's my pleasure to have you on the podcast today, Mikey. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Rob, for your invitation, and good morning to you and everybody.
So I think I'd like to start this one off by having you tell everybody a little bit about your personal background. So there are some very interesting things about you that I think some people inside of ophthalmology know, but others don't. And sort of go into a little bit about, sort of where you grew up and your education, and sort of give us the, overview as to how you entered the world of pharma, and specifically what led up to the formation of Nicox. I think that's an interesting way to sort of segue into the company. So fire away and let us know.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, actually, my life has been, unique being Italian in this world of R&D public company. And I graduated from University of Milan in medicinal chemistry. And then I got my degree of pharmacist as well. And I started working in the pharma industry since day one after my graduation and degree in pharmacy, and up to Recordati, which is a very well-known company in Italy and in Europe, a public company as well with a presence in US. And then I had the virus of the independency to create my own company. But actually, in 1995, at the time, there were no venture capital in the healthcare sector in Italy. So at the time, I had to go abroad. And I had the chance to meet, while in Recordati, Elizabeth Robinson. She was the director of product development of Recordati. And together, just became friends. I was mentioning this idea together with a friend of mine, pharmacologist, to have a startup around the anode donating technology, nitric oxide donating technology. And she helped me to find out the right way, because actually before joining Recordati in Italy, she was one of the first employees of Genzyme. She had a PhD from MIT. And so she knew the world, of course, of the venture capital. She introduced me to it. But unfortunately, we could not found the company in the United States for personal reasons. So we looked for local money, but as I said, in Italy, there were no venture capital at the time in the healthcare sector. So we found money with French venture capitalists, among them the famous Apax and Sofinova, and we created Nicox in 1996. The three co-founders, being in Italy, 2 Italian and 1 American, but with a French company. That's the reason why Nicox is French. It's headquartered in south of France, in the Sophia Antipolis, what I call the would-be San Diego, France. And but we always kept the research center in the Milano area, and that's the reason why all the new molecules have been, let's say, screened in the Milan labs of Nicox. But today, since many years, we are more and more American, I would say, with the U.S. Development Center in North Carolina in the RTP area.
So let's go back for a minute. So you worked in pharma directly out of college. Where did the interest in nitric oxide donation sort of come from? Is that based on your education, or is there something specific that you came across during your work where you decided that this was an important area that needed to be developed and had really not been developed at that time?
Good question, Rob. When I was more working in business development, licensing, and marketing, but during my time in Italy Pharma, I was exposed to nitric oxide in the cardiovascular field. And together with the pharmacology, the Italian pharmacology at the time was my colleague, we had the idea to apply the nitric oxide in a different way, rather than the conventional cardiovascular application that are well known since many, many years as a vasodilator. And so we thought of this nitric oxide donation that we implemented with a specific, let's say, chemical modification of existing molecule, trying to apply the nitric oxide properties in different therapeutic areas, among which ophthalmology. And actually, when we started Nicox, we were not really an ophthalmic company. We started with an application in the inflammation field, inflammation cardiovascular. Only in 2005-06, through a collaboration with Pfizer at the time, we started to apply our ideas to ophthalmology, and namely to prostaglandin for glaucoma. And then we generated the first idea, which was transformed then in Vyzulta, that, as you know, is the first drug based on our research platform, which has been approved by FDA a few years ago.
Fascinating. So you basically had an idea and built a company around it, and that's ultimately where Nicox came from. Okay, I want to get back to this in a minute, but tell me about the swimming, because you told me some factoids about swimming that I think are incredibly important to the attitude that you have towards Nicox, and I think it comes from your background as a swimmer. I don't think a lot of people know this about you, but tell everybody about the swimming, because it's really, really interesting.
Well, Rob, my friends know, because actually I'm taking my swimming experience when I was young. Every time I had to have a lot of resilience, like everybody in our sector. And yes, it's true. When I was young, for several years, I was in the national Italian swimming team. I went to the World Championship, and I had great experience, but with great sacrifice and a lot of resilience, because, you know, swimming is a tough sport. You need to train a lot, and many times you have just to train with one goal, that it's could be the major event, major championship, which is a little similar to what we do in research, where you work for years, and maybe when you get near to the wall, you lose because the drug doesn't work, and that's what happened to Nicox. So I keep saying that my resilience, I think it's coming from my sportive background. So I'm very happy. I'm still following the Italian team, and I'm part of the world of swimming still. But that's taught me a lot, and I think it's for everybody in general. Sport, this kind of sport, is very formative.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I come across a lot of people who are successful, who have been competitive athletes, and there's clearly a connection between, the competitive drive and the ability to, propagate, your business in some way. So I know you swam with Mark Spitz, weren't you?
At the time, yes. The famous, in the early 70s. Yeah. So I know a lot of the US swimmers. Some of them, I met them as well afterwards in US. So it's nice to be in touch with your world when you're young.
Well, it's not. I think it's nice for the audience to know that Italy isn't just famous for fast cars and delicious wine and fantastic food. We also have pharmaceutical entrepreneurs and, world-class swimming there too. So changing the whole perception of Italy. Michele, thank you for doing that. But anyway, okay, so let's go back. So here you are, you've entered the world of pharma. You've decided that nitric oxide donation is the area that you want to focus on. You formed a partnership with another smart person. You go out and you build Nicox, and what happens?
Well, what happened to me, what is happening, I guess, to 99% of the CEO and co-founder of the R&D and biotech company. Up and down, especially after the listing on the French stock exchange market in 1999. We went through, of course, the beginning of the new millennium. You remember very well what happened. And as I said at the beginning, the company was focused on a very interesting approach of our donating technology. But for several reasons that I'm not going to explain, not related to ophthalmology, we had a setback as a last meter with FDA, and at this point was around 2010, 11. At this point, the board, where I had a very, very good board member, I still have very good board member. Most of them are Americans, actually. At the time, we had Frank Baldino, was a friend of mine, was the CEO of Cephalon, who passed away, unfortunately, 10 years ago. And then Von Kalian was the CEO of Core Therapeutics. And they suggested me to give up on this project. Was too difficult to get approval and to focus in ophthalmology. Ophthalmology, as I said, we started in 2005-06 at the beginning with these ideas to develop new anodonated prostaglandin. And since then, really the company was refocused just in ophthalmology. So we started to think what we had in our labs, in our pocket. We went out and we acquired a few years later a smaller research company, a spin-off of Aura in Massachusetts, Essex, and we acquired 2 patents. One we approved, and the other one is in phase 2 for blepharitis. And since then we had in 2017 in December the approval by our partner Bausch + Lomb of Vyzulta, but at the same time we decided. Because we became more expert in ophthalmology, we had a great team, and we have a great team, as I said, in RTP in North Carolina, to develop our own drug for glaucoma that we believe is superior to any other single agent on the market in glaucoma, which is still a code NCX470. And we are in the last phase because it's in advanced phase 3, and we have a lot of hopes on this track.
So hold on, let me go back again just for the audience. So Nicox has 2 significant out-licensings for use in ophthalmology. The first is Vyzulta, right? Yes. Which is an agreement with Bausch + Lomb, and the second is Zerviate, right? Correct. But that's true. And why we licensed out and we didn't keep for us this drug? Very simple. Well, Vyzulta was licensed to Bausch + Lomb in 2010 when we were still focused on the other therapeutic areas, as I said, in inflammation and cardiovascular. And at the time, we didn't have in mind to become an ophtha company, so we couldn't develop both a project in another area and in ophthalmology at the same time. So we decided to license out to Bausch + Lomb. And Bausch + Lomb developed it up to approval in December 17. Zerviate, on the contrary, when we acquired this patent in 2014 from Essex, we did the last part of development and the approval process. We got the approval, but it was not enough, only Zerviate, to transform Nicox into a commercial company with a direct presence in US. It's not a product, as you can imagine, anti-allergic. You need other products in your bag. It's not a niche product. You need a strong field force. So we decided to license out. And actually, we licensed out to Ivans, which has been acquired to my friend Jerry St. Peter, who was acquired by Santen. And I think it's a great deal.
But now with 470 and 4251 in blepharitis, we think with these two drugs, they are sufficient, more than sufficient to transform Nicox in the future in US in a different company with a complete, fully fledged organization and launch our own drugs.
So let's go back just again for briefly. So tell me about the products that Nicox currently has in development that are in the clinical or preclinical stage. And then we're going to talk a little bit, just as a segue, in case you get into it directly, about how or what challenges you're facing as a European company that is building its own U.S. presence now.
Absolutely.
And I think that by discussing the product pipeline that you have in development, which some people are not aware of, and how you intend to then transform Nicox from a European company with an out-licensing portfolio to a company with a U.S. presence launching its own products.
Correct, Rob. It's a challenge. It will be another race for me. But 470, as I said, is the second compound of our ano-donating prostaglandin family. And as I said, we hope and we're convinced that this drug could be even better than Byzulta and all the other single compounds, agents treating IOP, lowering pressure. Why? Because, we had very strong signal from the phase 2 where we reached a statistical significant superiority versus latanoprost. So, and after 28 days of treatment, but we realized that we were not at the top of the efficacy dose, while we were more or less at the plateau of the side effects, which were mild hyperemia in a range of about 20%. So very, very average, I would say, the side effects. So we decided to start the phase 3 with an innovative adaptive design where we tested not only the highest dose of the phase 2, which was already statistically superior to latanoprost, but with an even higher dose, 0.1% of our drug, because as I said, we realized that 0.065, we were not at the top of the dose. And there was an independent advisory board that after a certain period of time, on a certain quite important number of patients, they look into the data, of course, agreed with FDA with a little alpha penalty, and they decided based on the guidelines we gave them that 0.1% was definitely the dose to go for the rest of the phase 3, because probably they perceived a strong signal of a better efficacy without any increase of side effects. So we are even more confident now that at the end of the phase 3, we'll be able to show even a much broader, wider superiority over latanoprost of 470. And in this case, we know that if we hit the statistical superiority, we'll be the only single agent having developed in phase 3 a prostaglandin versus another prostaglandin in a head-to-head comparison. So it will be very important. So we're very anxious. We had a little bit of delay with COVID, but now I think the phase 3 should be completed in the second quarter of next year. So we are working hard we're much more than 50% of enrollment. So we are very confident. Right. And that is the first compound. And the second is 4251, one of the two products together with Zerviate that we acquired in 2014 from ASICS. We developed this formulation with an applicator where you use this suspension of nanocrystal of fluticasone to treat the eyelid, to treat blepharitis, all kind of blepharitis. And I know there are some competitors going for specific kind of blepharitis. Our drug is supposed being a steroid to treat all the kinds of blepharitis, and especially the sinus symptom of blepharitis. And by minimizing the exposure of the eye to fluticasone, because so far there are eye drops and ointment which are used for blepharitis, but you put the drug in the eye. The blepharitis is an eyelid disease, so you don't need to put the drug in the eye. So we had a very nice phase 2A trial with very good results on the three main signs and symptoms of blepharitis, which FDA recognized as the basis for approval, which are redness, ocular discomfort, and debris. We got very good results. So we started in December a phase 2B on a 200 patient study, exactly the same endpoints. And the primary endpoint is a percentage of patients which will go down to 0 in each of the three signs and symptoms versus a percentage of patients which will go down to 0 with placebo. And let's hope to meet the primary endpoint. But, anyway, it's a phase 2. We want to see an indication of how further develop this drug. But these two drugs could be a good basis for Nicox, for the transformation that you were asking me.
Right. So and just for the audience, for those people who don't know, the reason why the comparison of your clinical stage glaucoma compound as a comparative study versus latanoprost is that almost every study in the U.S. has been compared to timolol, which for some reason is still the FDA standard, correct, whereas most ophthalmologists and optometrists in the United States use prostaglandin analogs as first-line therapy. Most of the clinical trials still make a comparison to timolol. A comparison to latanoprost would obviously be significant. That hasn't been done, to my knowledge, in a phase 3 study at this point. So that is a big deal. So you have these two products planned, and they are both later stage clinical assets in trials as we speak. How is Nicox going to execute now? What is the plan for you? It's great. We've seen this before in ophthalmology where you have a great product and, transforming that into a viable commercial entity with its own sales force and its own marketing plans is more complicated. And I know that you have that plan. So tell us how that's been for you in terms of development and struggles, challenges, and successes that you've had so far.
Absolutely. The first challenge, I think that Nicox will have to become a more and more US centered. We are already a lot of US centered in terms of, shareholder as well, and especially the development center. They said all our clinical CMC manufacturing team, and 90% of it is in US, in North Carolina. But as well, this will imply that we need at the appropriate time, probably could be after the results of our main clinical trial, to be listed on NASDAQ, and clearly to be financed, and hopefully at the right valuation that NASDAQ will recognize to Nicox once the clinical results will be out, to finance the company for the last step and for the transformation. I am a hard believer of the rollout strategy. So I know there are other products and other companies out. And clearly, I think that the management of the company, including probably with the top management, I'm talking about myself, will be American, because clearly I have a good experience in Europe. I was marketing products in Europe. I never did it in the US, so I don't pretend at my time, my age, also I feel a young swimmer to be the number one guy launching the drug in US. But that is not a problem. I know a lot of good professionals in US that would be very excited to transform the company. And we have exchanged a lot of ideas, how to do it, how to put together a pipeline of products, either by acquisition, license, or even merger with other small companies, to create around Nicox, which should have the most important products. I think 470 and 4251, even with the most prudent sales estimate, should be really a big a catalyst to attract other small companies or other products to create a new specialty pharma company in US. And I would assume that you have a timeline in mind for this as your clinical trials are beginning. So do you have any ability to discuss that timeline, or is that information you'd rather not distribute? I would not distribute, but I'm talking to professionals. They know that the phase 3 will take, especially for 470, its time. I think that to think that in a couple of years we'll be very close to an NDA submission for 470 is intuitive. I am not disclosing anything confidential. So And I know that when you start preparing an NDA submission, you must have started your pre-marketing, your pre-commercial activities. So these are indicative guidelines, but are very intuitive considering the status of 470.
So if you could look into the future, however many years you want to go forward, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, how do you view Nicox? What do you think the company looks like? I think if somebody asked you to describe the company today, you would have a description that you could give as to, the summary of what Nicox is. How does that differ from the way you think Nicox will be described, down the road?
No, without being a dreamer, because sportive are not dreamer, usually they're very, very concrete. And I was not a dreamer when I was thinking to succeed in getting an idea of our company, of my company, approved by FDA, and I did it. And I think I was one of the few, probably the first French company having a new chemical entity approved by FDA among the R&D biotech company. I'm not talking about Sanofi or the big pharma, of course. I'm thinking that Nicox, unless someone is coming and taking us over, which can always happen. In a public company, as I said, could be the catalyst to agglomerate around our pipeline a new specialty pharma company and growing. But to do this, we have to be in the States. Our commercial head and future CEO has to be in the States, and we have to be more present in this market. We have a large collaboration in Far East with Ocumension, which is a great Chinese specialty pharma company focused in ophthalmology. We have licensed entirely our pipeline in this region to Ocumension. They are listed on the Hong Kong stock market. And I have to say that they license it as well, a compound from another important ophthalmology company in a public company in the US. And their market cap is 10 times than ours, just to show that probably the value of Nicox has not been recognized yet, but I'm patient, I'm resilient. So I do hope that Nicox may be merging or acquiring product, changing the name, changing the management, will survive as a catalyst for a new ophthalmology company.
Yeah, I think that, and again, this is coming from the clinical side of my world, that there is this general sort of perception or sort of fear of dread that a lot of the specialty ophthalmology companies in the US have had either changes in ownership or changes in focus that have left a lot of early companies feeling as though the strategic marketplace has become very thin, where many larger previous ophthalmic partners are not as focused on the future of ophthalmology as they used to be. And we have welcomed new specialty pharmaceutical companies with open arms, and hearing that you have plans to pursue that pathway in the US, I think is a very welcome statement for entrepreneurs, people with early stage assets who I'm sure would love to talk to you about potential partnerships as you grow. And it's a reversal of a trend that I hope will continue, where we see more and more entities looking to become larger players in the ophthalmology market in the United States. So it's great to hear that. And I think that your strategy of partnering with someone in China is obviously critical, as we know that the growth of ophthalmic disease in China is probably going to drive most of the growth outside of the U.S. Going forward. So these are things that I believe make a lot of sense. So
yeah. No, I agree with what you said. I heard from several people that they wish to have new player in ophthalmology, actually, especially in the States, but in the world, in the Western world, because many companies were either disappeared or changed their focus, and that's exactly what I want to do with Advanced coming from Europe, and knowing that the opportunities in the States mainly, and second is Europe, but first the first market of focus of Nicox will be US, definitely.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how it's changed over the years, and as somebody who's actively involved in running a venture capital fund, we've come across some really fantastic companies with incredible assets, and our process in terms of figuring out where to invest also involves an assessment of where the exit would be and what the strategic partnership potential looks like, and it's become more challenging. As companies, I think, are trying to figure out, where their place is. Some of the larger acquisitions, even Bausch and Lomb and Alcon and Allergan's, sort of roll ups and roll outs, and it's difficult to, I think, identify, where some of these high quality early assets will end up. And we think companies like Nicox, companies like Ivance and with Santin, and companies like Aerie, who are, growing in this space, will be critical to the development of ophthalmic innovation in the United States. So thank you for, having that dream and for pursuing it for Nicox. I keep going back to the thought of you swimming competitively for the Italian national team. And swimming to me, is incredibly intense physical activity. And
absolutely.
And I sort of envision, sort of the path of Nicox so far as a swimming race that's, just made the turn, right? You got another half a lap to go here. But I think that the products that you're developing now and your outlook are great and sort of encouraging for United States ophthalmologists and I'm sure ophthalmologists around the world. Anything you want to share with us before we wrap up? It's a fascinating development to hear about a company that you started and have grown to this stage. Anything you want to share with us before we sign?
No, I just want to say that I miss US physically as well, because I was used to come 10 times a year in the last 20 years probably, and I was taking the family for vacation. And so I had my kids and my wife saying, we want to go back to the States. Of course, I was coming for work. They were enjoying the US, I'm missing, as an European, being a US character, always optimistic, looking for challenge and so on. I miss the US environment, which is very different from the European one. And I think that we all learn a lot, at least in the biotech sector, from US. And so I don't want to stay away too long.
Well, I think the most of us in the U.S. are thinking the exact opposite, that we would very much like to get to Italy right now, almost anywhere else. So anytime you want to flip-flop, just let me know. I can't wait to get back to Italy. It's been 5 years since I've been there.
Art, tourism, and vacation and sea, and it's a wonderful country, I have to say. But for my business, U.S. is the number one still. So.
Well, I think that we both agreed, and I think we discussed this briefly, that I hope and I think that at the American Academy of Ophthalmology meeting this year, we're going to be at a place where most people will be coming in. I think travel restrictions
hopefully
will be easier. I think people are planning on being there. I sort of feel like that's going to be the first real post-COVID breakout where we all are able to get together in a meaningful way, face to face, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing continued development and press releases from Nicox on its development. So just want to thank Michele Garufi again for taking the time to speak to us today. It was a pleasure and a privilege, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person, hopefully in New Orleans this year. Very soon.
Sure. Will not miss it. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, OIS.
Okay, thanks again, OIS audience. Again, looking forward to future podcasts with you.
Thank you for listening. Michele's story shows how resilience can lead to success. For more tips about successful innovation, register for the upcoming OIS Israel Innovation Showcase taking place on June 10th. And come back next week for another episode of the OIS Podcast.